My name is Jennifer Walsh and I'm 48 years old. For 15 years I worked as a senior designer at Hartwell Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious architectural firms. When people ask me what I did there, I used to say I designed buildings. The truth is I designed the buildings that made Hartwell Associates famous. You just never knew my name. The Willis Tower renovation that won the American Institute of Architects Award in 2019? That was my design. The sustainable housing project in Lincoln Park that got featured in Architectural Digest? Mine. The revolutionary children's hospital with natural healing spaces that became a model for healthcare design nationwide? Also mine. But if you looked at any of the press releases, magazine features, or award ceremonies, you'd only see one name, Robert Hartwell, founder and CEO of the firm. I discovered architecture by accident. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood in Milwaukee, I was the kid who spent hours building elaborate structures with whatever I could find. Cardboard boxes became castles. Legos turned into entire cities. My high school guidance counselor suggested drafting classes and something clicked. I got a full scholarship to the University of Wisconsin's architecture program and graduated at the top of my class. Robert Hartwell recruited me straight out of college in 2008. He was charming and persuasive, painting a picture of a firm where young talent could flourish. "Jennifer, you have something special," he'd said during my final interview. "I can see it in your portfolio. Come work for us and I'll make sure your designs change Chicago's skyline." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? Hartwell Associates was where every young architect wanted to work. They had the biggest clients, the most interesting projects, and Robert himself was considered a visionary in sustainable urban design. What I didn't know then was that Robert hadn't actually designed anything himself since the early 2000s. His vision came from the young architects he hired, used, and discarded when they started asking for recognition. For the first few years, I convinced myself this was normal. I was learning, paying my dues. Robert would present my designs to clients as our team's vision or what we've developed. Sometimes he'd even say, "Jennifer here did some of the initial sketches," as if my fully realized designs were just rough drafts he'd perfected. But I was young and grateful for the opportunity. I had student loans to pay and rent to cover. I told myself that eventually my time would come. The pattern became clear after my 5th year. I would spend months on a project, creating every detail from the foundation to the doorknobs. Robert would review it, suggest 1 or 2 minor changes, usually something cosmetic that actually made the design worse, and then present it to clients as his own work. When clients loved it, he graciously accepted their praise. When projects won awards, he stood alone on the stage. The breaking point should have come in 2018. I had designed a revolutionary mixed-use development that incorporated living walls, rainwater recycling, and community spaces that naturally encouraged interaction between residents. It was the most ambitious project I'd ever tackled. I worked 60-hour weeks for 6 months, refining every detail. The client, a major real estate developer, was blown away. At the presentation, Robert introduced it as my latest vision for urban living. Not our vision. His vision. I sat in the back of the conference room, invisible, while he walked them through my plans, my innovations, my solutions to their complex requirements. When the client asked about specific design choices, Robert answered as if he'd personally agonized over every decision. He even told an elaborate story about how he'd been inspired by a trip to Copenhagen, a city I'd visited on my own vacation and extensively researched for this exact project. He'd never been to Denmark in his life. That night, I went home and updated my portfolio, planning to quit. But then Robert did something clever. He gave me a raise. Not a huge one, but enough to make me hesitate. He also assigned me to an even bigger project, dangling the promise that this time things would be different. "You'll be the lead designer on this one, Jennifer. Full credit. Your name on the door." I stayed. I always stayed. Because the truth was, I loved the work itself. I loved solving the puzzle of how to make beautiful, functional spaces that improved people's lives. And Hartwell Associates, for all its flaws, gave me access to projects I couldn't get anywhere else. Where else would a woman from Milwaukee get to design buildings that would stand for generations? The firm grew enormously over my 15 years there, largely due to the innovative designs that won award after award. Robert became a celebrity architect, giving TED Talks about his philosophy of human-centered design, a philosophy I had developed and written about in internal memos he'd apparently memorized. He published a book called Building Tomorrow, a vision for sustainable urban architecture that featured detailed descriptions of my projects, my solutions, my innovations. I wasn't even mentioned in the acknowledgments. My colleagues knew the truth, of course. The other architects, especially the younger ones, would quietly seek me out for advice. "Jennifer, can you look at this?" They'd ask, knowing I was the real creative force behind the firm's success. But they were all in the same position I was in, dependent on their jobs, hoping for their own chance at recognition, afraid to rock the boat. The administrative staff knew too. Robert's assistant, Patricia, once quietly told me she'd kept copies of all my original design documents with my name on them, just in case you ever need them. The cleaning crew would sometimes find me working late, long after Robert had left for whatever charity gala or industry event he was attending, and they'd nod knowingly. Everyone saw what was happening. Nobody said anything. That's how these things work. I told myself I was building a body of work that would speak for itself eventually. I saved every sketch, every email, every piece of evidence that showed the designs were mine. Not because I planned some kind of revenge, but because I needed proof, for myself more than anyone, that I had created something meaningful, even if no one knew it. By 2023, I was the most senior designer at the firm besides Robert himself. I was also the highest paid, though still making a fraction of what Robert earned from the projects I designed. Young architects came and went, but I remained, the invisible foundation holding up the entire creative structure of Hartwell Associates. That's when everything changed. Tuesday, October 3, 2023, started like any other day. I arrived at the office at 7:30 a.m., an hour before most of the staff, to work on the final details of our latest project, a revolutionary senior living community that reimagined aging in place. I had spent 2 years on this design, creating spaces that maintained dignity and independence while providing necessary care. It was perhaps my best work, combining everything I'd learned about human psychology, sustainable design, and community building. At 10 a.m., Patricia knocked on my office door with an unusual expression on her face. "Robert wants to see you in conference room B," she said. Then, quietly, she added, "HR is there too." My stomach dropped. After 15 years in corporate America, you know that HR plus an unexpected meeting equals bad news. But I couldn't imagine what the bad news could be. Our latest project had just been approved for construction. We had more work than ever. My performance had never been questioned. Conference room B was the small one, tucked away from the main office. Inside sat Robert, looking uncomfortable behind his designer glasses, and Melissa from HR, a woman I'd maybe spoken to twice in 5 years. There was also a man I didn't recognize in an expensive suit. "Jennifer, please sit down," Robert said, not making eye contact. Melissa slid a folder across the table with practiced efficiency. "I'm afraid we have some difficult news. The firm is undergoing a strategic restructuring." We're moving in a new direction that requires fresh perspectives and different skill sets. Your position is being eliminated effective immediately. I stared at them for a moment, processing the corporate speak. After 15 years, after everything I'd created for them, it came down to this sterile moment in a small conference room. I see, I said calmly. May I ask what prompted this decision? Robert finally looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes, not guilt exactly but a kind of cold calculation. The industry is changing, Jennifer. We need to appeal to younger clients, embrace new technologies. Your design aesthetic, while excellent, is becoming dated. Dated. My aesthetic was dated. The same aesthetic that had won the firm 12 major awards in the last 3 years alone. We're bringing in fresh talent, Melissa added, as if that explained everything. Marcus Chen will be taking over as lead designer. He brings a modern sensibility that aligns with our new vision. Marcus Chen. I knew him by reputation, a 32-year-old hotshot from Los Angeles who was famous more for his social media presence than his actual designs. He had 100,000 Instagram followers and had given a viral TED Talk about disrupting architectural paradigms. His actual buildings were mediocre at best, all flash with no substance. We're prepared to offer you a generous severance package, the man in the suit finally spoke. 6 months' salary, continued health benefits through the end of the year, and a strong letter of recommendation. In exchange, you'll sign this non-disclosure agreement and non-compete clause. I picked up the document and scanned it. It was comprehensive and ruthless. I couldn't work for any architectural firm in Illinois for 2 years. I couldn't discuss any projects I'd worked on at Hartwell Associates. I couldn't even claim credit for my own designs. What about the Riverside Senior Living project? I asked. I've been working on it for 2 years. It's my design from foundation to finish. The firm's design, Robert corrected quickly. All work produced under employment belongs to Hartwell Associates. You know this, Jennifer. We'll need your office cleared by end of day, Melissa added. Security will escort you out. It's standard procedure. Standard procedure. 15 years reduced to standard procedure. What if I don't sign? I asked, looking directly at Robert. Then you leave with nothing. The lawyer said simply. No severance, no benefits, no recommendation, and we'll enforce the existing confidentiality clauses in your employment contract to their fullest extent. I stood up, leaving the documents on the table. I'll need time to review this with my own lawyer. You have until 5 p.m. today, Melissa said. After that, the offer is withdrawn. I walked out of that room with my head high, but inside I was reeling. Back in my office, not my office anymore, I sat at my desk and looked around at 15 years of my life. The walls were covered with framed sketches and plans, photos from construction sites, awards that bore the firm's name but represented my work. Patricia appeared at my door within minutes. I heard, she said quietly, closing the door behind her. Robert told me this morning. Jennifer, this is wrong. Everyone knows those designs are yours. Knowing and proving are different things, I replied, starting to pack my personal items. Maybe not, Patricia said, looking around nervously. She pulled a flash drive from her pocket. I've been keeping records, every original email where you submitted designs. Every document with metadata showing you as the creator, every revision history showing Robert's minimal input, 15 years of proof. I stared at the small device in her hand. Patricia, you could lose your job for this. I'm retiring in 3 months anyway, she said, pressing it into my hand. I've watched him do this to 3 other designers before you, but you're different, Jennifer. You didn't just create a few good buildings, you created the entire reputation this firm stands on. Don't let him erase you. After Patricia left, I called my college roommate Susan, who was now a successful attorney in New York. Don't sign anything, she said immediately after I explained the situation. Forward me everything in, Jennifer. Start documenting everything you can remember about every project, dates, details, your specific contributions. We might have options here. I spent the next 3 hours quietly photographing documents, forwarding emails to my personal account, and creating a detailed timeline of my work at the firm. At 4:45 p.m. I walked back into conference room B. "I'm not signing," I said simply. Robert's face flushed. "That's a mistake, Jennifer, you'll get nothing." "We'll see," I replied. Melissa looked uncomfortable. "Jennifer, please reconsider. This is a generous offer." "Generous?" I laughed, surprising myself with the bitterness in my voice. "I designed every significant project this firm has produced for 15 years. My work built Robert's reputation, won his awards, earned his millions, and you're offering me 6 months' salary to disappear quietly?" "No thank you." "You're making this personal," Robert said coldly. "This is business." "You're right," I said. "It is business, and I'm going to treat it as such." Security arrived at 5 p.m. sharp. 2 guards I'd said good morning to every day for years now looking embarrassed as they watched me pack my belongings. Word had spread through the office, and I could feel eyes on me as I carried my boxes to the elevator. Some of the younger architects looked shocked, others seemed afraid, probably wondering if they were next. As the elevator doors closed, I heard Robert addressing the staff, his voice carrying across the open office. "Change is never easy, but it's necessary for growth. Marcus Chin will be joining us Monday, bringing fresh energy and innovative ideas. I'm confident he'll help us reach new heights." Standing in the parking garage with my boxes, I felt a strange sense of clarity. For 15 years, I had accepted being invisible because I loved the work. But Robert had just made a crucial mistake. He'd assumed I would go quietly, that I would accept being erased. He'd assumed wrong. That evening, I sat in my apartment surrounded by boxes of my professional life and made a decision. I wouldn't just fight for recognition of my past work. I would create something new, something entirely mine, something that would make Robert Hartwell realize exactly what he had thrown away. The first week after being fired was surreal. For 15 years, my life had revolved around the firm's schedule. Now I woke up at 7 a.m. with nowhere to go. I spent those early days organizing the documentation Patricia had given me and my own records, creating a comprehensive archive of my work. The more I reviewed, the angrier I became. There were emails where Robert explicitly asked me to develop designs for projects he was struggling with. "Jennifer, I need your magic touch on this one." He'd written about the Morrison Library project that went on to win a National Design Award. There were revision histories showing that his only contributions were usually cosmetic changes that I'd later have to secretly reverse because they compromised the structural integrity or aesthetic cohesion of the designs. But anger wasn't a strategy. I needed a plan. Susan called on day 3 with interesting news. "I've been researching, and there's something you should know. In Illinois, there's a doctrine called ShopRight that typically gives employers ownership of work created by employees. However, there's an exception when an employee can prove they were the sole creative force and that the employer materially misrepresented the origin of the work to third parties for financial gain. If Robert publicly claimed your designs as his own for financial benefit, and you can prove it caused you professional harm, you might have grounds for a lawsuit. But that's not the interesting part. There's something more interesting than that. I found out that 3 major projects you designed, the ones that established the firm's reputation, were created before your employment contract was updated in 2012 to include comprehensive intellectual property assignment. The original contract from 2008 only covered work directly assigned by the firm. If you developed these designs independently and brought them to the firm. My heart started racing. The Millennium Park Pavilion, the Green River Affordable Housing Complex, and the Chicago Children's Museum expansion, I had indeed developed the initial concepts for all 3 before they became official firm projects. I had sketches dated months before Robert assigned them to me. "Keep researching," I told Susan. "I think I know where you're going with this." While Susan worked the legal angles, I focused on something else, the future. At 48, starting my own firm seemed daunting, but not impossible. I had savings, thanks to living well below my means despite my decent salary. More importantly, I had ideas, years of designs that Robert had rejected for being too innovative or not commercially viable. One design in particular had haunted me for 5 years, a modular housing system for homeless veterans that could be quickly deployed and personalized while maintaining dignity and community. Robert had killed it immediately. Not profitable enough, he'd said. But I had continued developing it in my spare time, refining it, solving problems, making it both beautiful and practical. On day 10 of my unemployment, I got an unexpected call. Jennifer? This is David Kim from the Chicago Veterans Foundation. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I heard about your departure from Hartwell Associates. David was a client I'd worked with 3 years ago on a small project, a memorial garden that Robert had considered beneath the firm's attention but which I had poured my heart into anyway. News travels fast, I said carefully. Jennifer, I'll be direct. Everyone in Chicago knows you were the real talent at that firm. I have a project, a big one. Federal funding for veteran housing. We need someone who understands how to create homes, not just shelters. Would you be interested in consulting? Consulting. I hadn't even considered it as an option. Tell me more, I said. The project was exactly the kind of thing I'd dreamed about, converting an abandoned warehouse complex into transitional housing for 200 veterans, with on-site services, job training facilities, and community spaces. The budget was substantial, the timeline aggressive, and the board wanted someone with a proven track record but fresh ideas. I can't officially hire you for 2 weeks, bureaucracy, but I can send you the RFP to review. If you're interested, we'd love to see a proposal. After the call, I sat in my apartment staring at my laptop. For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt energized. This was my chance to show what I could do without Robert's interference, without his need to commercialize everything, without his ego requiring center stage. I pulled out my veteran housing designs and began adapting them to the warehouse space. For the first time in years, I designed without constraints, without second-guessing what Robert would approve. The ideas flowed like water breaking through a dam. 3 days into the design work, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Walsh? This is Amanda Reeves from the Chicago Tribune. I'm working on a story about the recent changes at Hartwell Associates. I understand you were let go despite being their lead designer for 15 years. I can't comment on that, I said automatically. I understand. But Ms. Walsh, I've been covering architecture in Chicago for 20 years. I've always wondered why your name never appeared on projects that had your signature style all over them. Would you be willing to discuss your work in general terms? Not about the firm specifically, but about your design philosophy. I hesitated. Even without signing the NDA, I knew speaking to the press was risky. But Amanda continued. I've spoken to 3 former Hartwell employees who all confirm you were the creative force behind most of their award-winning projects. They're willing to go on record. This story is happening with or without you. But I'd rather hear your side. Let me think about it, I said. That evening, Susan called with more research. Jennifer, I found something significant. Remember the book Robert published? Building Tomorrow. How could I forget? It was basically a detailed description of all my work. Well, he made a mistake. In Chapter 7, he describes the design process for the Lincoln Park Sustainable Housing Project in first person, with specific dates and locations. I checked, he was in Tokyo those weeks for a conference. You, however, have emails showing you were working 18-hour days on that exact project. It's proof he couldn't have done what he claims in his own book. That's interesting, but There's more. I found the patent filings. What patents? The modular green wall system you developed for the Morrison Library. The rainwater recycling system from the Green River Project, the natural ventilation design from the Children's Hospital. You filed patents for all of these innovations, didn't you? I had, years ago, almost as an afterthought. They were technical innovations that went beyond aesthetic design, and a professor had once told me to always protect truly novel ideas. Robert's been licensing those technologies to other firms, Susan continued. Through the company, of course. But the patents are in your name. He's been collecting royalties on your inventions while simultaneously claiming he created them. The room seemed to spin slightly. How much? From what I can find in public filings. About $3.2 million over the last 5 years. I sat down hard. $3 million from my innovations, while I was earning a salary that barely covered a decent apartment in Chicago. Jennifer, you have a case. A strong one. But more importantly, you have leverage. 2 weeks after my firing, Marcus Chen started at Hartwell Associates with great fanfare. Robert organized a press event to announce the new era of the firm, with Marcus front and center. The Chicago Tribune ran a fawning piece about the fresh vision Marcus was bringing, featuring a photo of him and Robert standing in front of a wall displaying awards for projects I had designed. That same day, I submitted my proposal to the Chicago Veterans Foundation. It was the best work I'd ever done. Free from Robert's commercial constraints, I had created something that was both practical and profound, spaces that honored the dignity of veterans while providing comprehensive support services. The modular design meant it could be replicated in other cities at a fraction of traditional construction costs. I included detailed budgets, timelines, and 3D renderings that showed how the abandoned warehouse would be transformed into a community. David Kim called me 2 hours after receiving it. Jennifer, this is extraordinary. When can you present to the board? Whenever you need me. Tomorrow. 2 p.m. This is exactly what we've been looking for. That evening, I finally returned Amanda Reeves' call. I'll talk to you, I said, but I want to focus on the work, not the drama. I want to discuss the designs themselves, the philosophy behind them, the problems they solved. People should know how these buildings came to exist. That's exactly what I want too, Amanda assured me. Can we meet tomorrow morning? We met at a coffee shop in Wicker Park, far from the loop where I might run into former colleagues. Amanda was in her 50s, with sharp eyes and the kind of careful attention that comes from decades of investigative reporting. Let's start with the Millennium Park Pavilion, she said, pulling out a recorder. It was Hartwell's breakthrough project. Can you walk me through the design process? For 2 hours, I talked about my work for the first time with complete honesty. I explained how the pavilion's distinctive curved roof wasn't just aesthetic but created natural acoustics that eliminated the need for excessive amplification. I described spending nights in the park, observing how people moved through the space, where they gathered, where they sought solitude. I talked about the hidden environmental features, the solar panels integrated into the design so seamlessly that most people never noticed them, the rainwater collection system that irrigated the surrounding gardens. All of this sounds like your personal design philosophy, not the firm's, Amanda observed. Design philosophies come from individuals, not companies, I replied carefully. Companies execute vision. The vision itself has to come from somewhere. And where did Hartwell and Associates' vision come from? I met her eyes. You'd have to ask them that. After the interview, I drove to the Veterans Foundation for my presentation. The boardroom was full, 12 board members, various stakeholders, and several veterans who would be future residents. I presented for an hour, but the real test came during questions. How do we know you can deliver this? One board member asked. Your resume shows 15 years at one firm. This would be your first solo project of this scale. Before I could answer, David Kim spoke up. With respect, Jennifer Walsh designed most of Chicago's significant buildings over the last decade. The only thing solo about this would be her finally getting appropriate credit. The veterans in the room were my toughest critics and strongest supporters. They grilled me about everything from bathroom privacy to communal space layouts. I had answers for everything because I'd been thinking about this project for 5 years. When I designed this, I said, I thought about my uncle, who came back from Vietnam and lived in his car for 2 years because he couldn't find housing that felt safe. Every decision, from the sight lines to the sound insulation, is about creating spaces where people can heal while maintaining their dignity. The board voted unanimously to hire me as lead architect for the project. I was walking to my car, feeling the first real joy I'd experienced in weeks, when my phone rang. It was Robert. Jennifer, he said, his voice tight with anger. What did you tell the Tribune? I discussed my design philosophy and some general architectural principles. You discussed proprietary firm information. I discussed my own thoughts and experiences, Robert. Unless you're claiming to own those too. You're playing a dangerous game. I could make sure you never work in this city again. Like you tried to do by firing me. That was business. This is personal. No, Robert. Stealing my work for 15 years was personal. This is just me finally existing in my own right. He hung up on me. The next morning, Susan called early. I have news. Big news. I've been in contact with the U.S. Patent Office. Those 3 patents you filed? Robert's been licensing them through the firm, but there's a problem. The firm never formally acquired the rights from you. There's no assignment document, no transfer agreement, nothing. You still own them personally. What does that mean? It means every licensing fee the firm collected should have gone to you. It also means they've been committing fraud by licensing technology they don't own. That can't be right. Surely they would have checked. I think they assumed, like with your designs, that everything you created belonged to them automatically. But patents are different. They require explicit transfer. And Jennifer? The statute of limitations for fraud in Illinois is 5 years. They've been illegally licensing your technology for exactly that long. I sat down slowly, processing this information. So what do I do? First, we send a cease and desist letter. Then, we demand an accounting of all licensing fees collected. And if they don't comply, we sue. Not just for the money, but for recognition. This is your leverage to get your name attached to your work. That afternoon, Amanda's first article appeared online with the headline, The Invisible Architect, Exploring the Mind Behind Chicago's Most Celebrated Buildings. It was brilliant journalism, never directly stating that I had designed Hartwell's projects, but laying out such detailed descriptions of design choices, timelines, and philosophies that any reader could connect the dots. The article went viral within the architecture community. By evening, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Former colleagues, industry contacts, even clients I'd worked with were reaching out. The most interesting call came from James Morrison, the philanthropist whose library I had designed. Jennifer, I just read the Tribune article. I had no idea. Robert always implied. Well, it doesn't matter now. I have a proposition for you. I'm funding a new innovation center at Northwestern. I want you to design it. Your name, your firm, your vision. Interested. My firm. I hadn't even registered a business yet, and I was already getting offers. Very interested, I said. The cease and desist letter arrived at Hartwell and Associates on a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after my firing. According to Patricia, who called me immediately, Robert went pale when he read it. He immediately called an emergency meeting with the firm's lawyers. By noon, the lawyers had confirmed Susan's research. The patents were indeed mine. The firm had been illegally licensing them for 5 years. The potential liability was enormous, not just the $3.2 million in licensing fees, but potential criminal fraud charges. Robert called me within an hour. "What do you want?" he asked without preamble. "Recognition and compensation," I replied simply. "My name on my work. The licensing fees you collected on my patents. And a public acknowledgement of my contributions to the firm." "That's extortion." "No, that's justice. You have 48 hours to respond." While Robert scrambled to find a solution, Amanda's second article dropped, "The Patent Problem: How Chicago's Most Famous Firm May Have Built Success on Stolen Innovation." This time, she had documents, patent filings with my name, licensing agreements with the firm's name, a clear paper trail showing the disconnect. She also had quotes from 3 former employees confirming that I had developed these innovations independently. The architecture world exploded. The American Institute of Architects announced they were reviewing awards given to Hartwell and Associates. Clients started calling the firm, demanding to know who had actually designed their buildings. The Morrison Library Board issued a statement saying they were concerned about potential misrepresentation and were reviewing their relationship with the firm. Marcus Chen, the new lead designer, lasted exactly 1 week. He resigned via email, stating that the situation had become untenable and he couldn't work under such circumstances. His departure made the front page of the architectural trade publications. Meanwhile, I was busier than I'd ever been. The Veterans Foundation project was moving forward rapidly. James Morrison had confirmed funding for the Innovation Center. 3 other potential clients had reached out after reading the articles. I officially registered my firm, Walsh Architecture and Design. Clean, simple, and unmistakably mine. On day 4 after the cease and desist, Patricia called with insider information. "The firm is hemorrhaging clients," she said. 3 major projects were cancelled yesterday. The staff is in full revolt. The junior architects are demanding to know if their work will also be stolen. Robert hasn't been in the office for 2 days. That evening Robert's lawyer called Susan. "My client is prepared to negotiate," he said. The meeting was set for the following Monday at a neutral law firm downtown. I arrived with Susan to find Robert looking haggard, flanked by 2 lawyers. Gone was the confident, charismatic leader who had fired me just a month earlier. In his place sat a man watching his empire crumble. "Let's make this simple," his lead attorney began. "We're prepared to offer a settlement. $1 million for the patent licensing fees, plus an additional $2 million for past oversights. In exchange, you sign a comprehensive NDA and agreement not to pursue further action." "No NDA," I said immediately, "and I want public recognition." "That's not possible," Robert interjected. "The firm's reputation." "The firm's reputation is built on my work," I interrupted. "I want my name retroactively added as lead designer to every project I created. I want a public statement acknowledging my contributions, and I want $4 million in compensation, the $3.2 million in licensing fees plus damages for 15 years of stolen credit." "That would destroy the firm," Robert said quietly. "No, your choices destroyed the firm. I'm just asking for what was always mine." The negotiation went on for 3 hours. In the end, we reached an agreement. The firm would pay me $3.5 million, the licensing fees plus a settlement for past contributions. A joint statement would be released acknowledging me as the primary creative force behind 15 major projects. My name would be added to all awards and official records as co-designer. I would retain all rights to my patents and future licensing fees. No NDA, I was free to discuss my work openly. The statement went out the next day. The headline in the Tribune read, "Hartwell and Associates acknowledges primary creative force behind award-winning designs was former employee." The fallout was swift and complete. By the end of the week, 6 more clients had terminated their contracts with Hartwell Associates. 12 of the firm's 18 architects had resigned. The American Institute of Architects had officially transferred several awards from Robert's name to mine. 3 universities that had given Robert honorary degrees announced they were reviewing those honors. Patricia called me with a final update 2 weeks later. "Robert's selling the firm," she said. "Or what's left of it. A developer is buying the office space. The Hartwell name will disappear. He's moving to Arizona, claiming he's retiring for health reasons." I felt no satisfaction in his destruction, only a sense of completion. It had never been about revenge. It was about truth. 6 months later, I stood at the construction site of the Chicago Veterans Housing Project, watching the steel beams rise against the morning sky. My firm now employed 12 people, including 4 architects who had left Hartwell and Associates to join me. We had more work than we could handle. David Kim stood beside me reviewing the latest progress reports. "You know what the best part of this building is?" he asked. "What's that?" "Everyone will know who designed it. Your name will be on the cornerstone, in the press releases and the history books. No one can ever take that away." He was right. But the real satisfaction came from something simpler. The veteran who had stopped by the previous week looked at the plans and said, "This feels like home." That's what architecture was supposed to be about. Creating spaces that improved lives. And for the first time in my career, I was doing it on my own terms, with my own name, with my own voice. The firm that had taken credit for my work for 15 years was gone. The man who had built his reputation on my creativity was forgotten. But the buildings remained, and now, finally, everyone knew whose vision had brought them to life. A year after my firing, I received an unexpected package. Inside was Robert's book, Building Tomorrow, with a post-it note on Chapter 7, the chapter where he'd claimed credit for work he couldn't have done. The note, in Patricia's handwriting, simply said he left this behind when he cleaned out his office. "Thought you might want it for your archives." I flipped through the pages, seeing my work described in someone else's voice, my innovations claimed by someone else's ego. Then I closed it and placed it on a shelf in my office. Not as a reminder of what had been stolen, but as evidence of what I had reclaimed. The next morning I arrived early at my office, my real office, with my name on the door, and began sketching designs for a new project. A school for children with autism, incorporating sensory gardens and quiet spaces, natural light and organic flow. It was complex and challenging and exactly the kind of project Robert would have said wasn't commercial enough. But I wasn't working for Robert anymore. I wasn't working for anyone but the children who would learn in those spaces, the teachers who would inspire in those rooms, the community that would gather in those halls. My phone rang. Another potential client, another opportunity to build something meaningful. "Walsh Architecture," I answered the words, still feeling new and right. "How can we help you create something extraordinary?" Because that's what I did now. I created extraordinary spaces, and everyone knew exactly who was creating them. Thank you for reading my story on Fireside Life Lessons. Sometimes it takes losing everything to realize you already had everything you needed: talent, vision, and the courage to stand on your own. If you've ever had your work undervalued or your contributions ignored, remember, the truth has a way of surfacing, and authentic talent cannot be hidden forever. Your name matters, your work matters, you matter. Share your own stories of professional recognition and vindication in the comments below. And remember to subscribe for more stories of triumph over workplace injustice.